Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The park was bathed in the soft light of late morning. The leaves of the trees rustled gently in the breeze, and the air still smelled of dew. Sitting on a bench, an old woman watched the birds with an almost meditative calm. She had neatly combed gray hair, round glasses, and a brown coat that looked as if it had stood the test of time. Her hands, wrinkled but firm, held a polished wooden cane. At first glance, she looked like any other grandmother enjoying a quiet moment. Not far from her, a group of young men, armed and noisy, were practicing at a small, makeshift shooting range. They were self-assured, laughing and challenging each other. "You can't even hit the target at 3 meters. Hey, Grandma, stay seated on your bench." The old woman didn't move. Her gaze, however, followed their every move with icy focus. She rose slowly, placing her cane on the bench. Each of her steps seemed measured, precise, almost silent. The young shooters burst into laughter as she approached, some mimicking protective gestures as if to defend themselves against her supposed fragility. But behind those seemingly tired eyes lay the sharpness of a professional, a sharpshooter who had spent her life handling weapons with pinpoint accuracy, anticipating the slightest movement, and controlling her breathing perfectly. As they continued their jeers, she pulled a compact, lightweight, and perfectly maintained pistol from her bag. Her hands didn't tremble, every movement was sure and calculated. The young people, too busy mocking and talking amongst themselves, didn't notice the sudden silence that enveloped the park. The world seemed to have frozen around her. And then, with a fluidity that contrasted sharply with her frail stature, she took aim. The lesson was going to be harsh, but fair. Never judge a person by their appearance, because behind a grandmotherly face could hide the precision and experience of a sharpshooter ready to remind everyone that respect is earned, even in the hushed silence of a quiet park. The next morning, the park seemed more lively than usual. Sunlight filtered through the branches, creating luminous patches on the ground. The old woman, Margaret Reynolds, was already there, sitting on her usual bench. Her blue eyes, sharp despite her age, scanned every movement around her. She knew something was about to happen. A few meters away, 4 young men, all in their 20s, approached with bags containing weapons and cardboard targets. The group's leader, a certain Tyler, a self-assured teenager with a modern haircut and an arrogant smile, glanced at Margaret and sneered. "Look at this, a granny comes to stroll around here as if she belongs here." The others mocked them, mimicking exaggerated gestures and feigning fear. They set up their shooting range, talking loudly to make sure Margaret could hear them. But she didn't react, merely raising a slight eyebrow. Every sound, every movement of the young people was registered in her mind. She was no longer a mere spectator, she was observing, assessing, calculating. Tyler pretended to aim his rifle, then added, laughing, "Hey Grandma, do you want to try? We promise not to hurt you too much." Margaret rose slowly, placing her cane on the bench. She approached the group, but without haste, as if each step had been carefully planned. The young people burst into laughter at her seemingly fragile gait. She then took a small metal box from her bag and opened it delicately. Inside lay a compact pistol, maintained with military precision. "You get a lot of fun making fun of people," she said in a calm but firm voice. "Oh, it's just a bit of fun, Granny," replied Tyler, thinking of an innocent game. Margaret smiled slightly, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She placed the pistol on the bench, but without pointing it at them. Her composure immediately unsettled the group. The young people, oblivious, continued talking, but each word resonated differently under her sharp gaze. It was at that moment that she made them understand, without even firing a shot, that they had just entered into a game they hadn't anticipated, and that Margaret Reynolds, the old lady of the park, was not a simple spectator. Tyler and his friends were too busy setting up their targets to notice the subtle change in the air. Margaret, on the other hand, had stepped back a few paces, observing every gesture, every expression of the young people. She immediately noticed the way Tyler was holding his rifle, too loosely, his chin misaligned. The others were even more careless. "Do you really think you can make fun of me without consequences?" Margaret asked calmly, her soft voice contrasting with the rising tension. The young people burst out laughing. "Oh, Grandma, you're funny. We'll show you how to shoot." Tyler adjusted his stance and aimed at the target, but Margaret didn't move. She simply rested a hand on her cane and fixed the boys with her icy blue eyes. Silence fell suddenly. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Without warning, Margaret stepped forward, pulled out her pistol, and fired a small, precise shot toward the edge of the farthest target. The noise startled everyone. But what shocked Tyler and his friends was the accuracy. The bullet had hit the exact corner of the target, leaving a tiny but perfect impact. What?" stammered Tyler, incredulous. "You see," said Margaret with a discreet smile, "you should never underestimate experience." The young people exchanged worried glances. The confidence of the previous day had vanished. Tyler tried to regain control. "It was just a stroke of luck." But Margaret shook her head, almost kindly. "It's not luck, young man. It's discipline and years of practice. You could spend your whole life training and never achieve this level of precision." The other youths instinctively began to back away, sensing that their arrogance had been misplaced. Margaret then picked up her pistol, carefully put it away, and made a gesture inviting the boys to reflect. Before you make fun of others, always ask yourself what you really know about them. You might be surprised, and I assure you, some surprises are unpleasant. The group remained silent, unable to find a response. For the first time, Tyler felt a fear he had never felt before, the fear of underestimating someone because of their age. The next day, Tyler and his friends couldn't forget Margaret's chilling accuracy. Their arrogance had been shattered, and each of them felt the need to regain control of the situation. "We can't let this old woman humiliate us like this," Tyler growled. "Okay, but this time we're going to be ready," replied another, nervous but determined. They decided to return to the park, intending to impress her with their speed and power, believing the old woman couldn't compete with a proper group training session. The targets were arranged in a more complex way, and the shots became faster and louder. They laughed amongst themselves, believing that this time, Margaret wouldn't stand a chance. Margaret was already there, sitting on her bench, her hands resting on her cane, observing with unwavering calm. Her gaze betrayed no fear, only intense concentration. She knew every possible move the young men made, experience had sharpened her senses. Tyler made a move to start, but before they could fire, Margaret slowly rose. With a fluid step, she positioned herself at a safe distance and drew her pistol. This time, she aimed not at the edge of the targets but directly at the center, and her bullets struck every mark in record time. The shots were precise, almost silent, and the youths were powerless to keep up with Margaret's speed and control. How do you?" stammered one of them, unable to form a complete sentence. "Discipline, patience, and years of training," explained Margaret, her smile barely perceptible. Tyler felt shame and fear creeping in. This was no longer a game, it was a humbling experience. Every bullet Margaret fired seemed to remind him that they had judged too quickly, too easily. The young men lowered their weapons, unable to continue. Margaret put away her pistol, picked up her walking stick, and walked confidently away from the group. She hadn't shouted, hadn't cried victory. She had simply shown what respect was, and the impact on the young people was stronger than any public humiliation. The boys remained silent, realizing that underestimating someone could be costly. Margaret, meanwhile, returned to her bench as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a clear message: never judge by appearances, for true strength is often hidden where it is least expected. After their humiliation at the park, Tyler and his friends could no longer bear the shame. They gathered in Tyler's garage, discussing the situation with frustration and anger. "We can't let her continue to ridicule us," Tyler said, clenching his fists. "But she's an old lady," another man interjected. "You can't just beat her with force," he added hesitantly. "Exactly. We need to be more cunning, more subtle. No shooting on sight. This time, we're going to set a trap for him, Tyler announced with a wicked smile. Their plan was to stage a fake shooting competition in the park the next day. They would invite Margaret to show off her skills, and then surprise her with a combination of rapid-fire shots and moving targets. They thought her pride would compel her to accept, and that this time, she would be outdone. Margaret arrived that morning as usual, observing the park with her sharp eyes. She immediately noticed the changes, targets set up differently, obstacles added, and an air of preparation among the youngsters. A faint smile played on her lips. She understood that Tyler had once again underestimated her vigilance. "Well, Grandma, ready for the real challenge?" Tyler said, trying to sound confident. "Always ready," replied Margaret calmly, without looking up from her notebook where she was noting potential positions and movements. When the shooting began, Margaret remained remarkably calm. Every shot she fired was perfectly calculated, hitting the targets even when they were moving. The impatient youths tried to impress her with speed and complexity, but Margaret anticipated their every move. Each missed shot was a stark reminder of their arrogance. Frustrated, Tyler then tried to get closer, hoping to unsettle her with his presence. But Margaret took a step to the side, dodging perfectly, as if she had planned this move in advance. "You see," she said gently, "haste is the enemy of precision." "It's impossible," Tyler murmured, feeling panic rising within him. At the end of the session, the young people were exhausted and demoralized. Margaret put away her weapon and retrieved her cane, leaving Tyler and his friends to face their own defeat. Their cunning plan had just collapsed, and for the first time, they realized that their old adversary wasn't playing by their rules, but by her own. Margaret walked away slowly, leaving behind a silent park and young men who understood, with a mixture of fear and respect, that experience and mastery always overcome arrogance and impulsiveness. After several public humiliations, Tyler couldn't get Margaret out of his head. Fear had given way to obsession. He was determined to prove he could outdo her, but this time, he wouldn't settle for a simple demonstration in the park. His plan would be more personal, more strategic. He spent the evening thinking, watching shooting videos, and mentally rehearsing Margaret's every move. He thought he had her figured out, a slow, methodical old woman who followed a predictable rhythm. So he decided to provoke her outside her usual environment. The next morning, Margaret was out for her usual stroll, enjoying the tranquility of the park. Little did she know that Tyler had been discreetly following her from his home, planning a confrontation away from the usual witnesses. As she settled down to watch the birds, Tyler suddenly appeared, a rifle in his hand. "Surprise, Grandma," he said, a confident smile on his lips. "Tyler," Margaret murmured calmly, raising an eyebrow. Tyler aimed his weapon at the targets he had set up specifically for her. But there was a problem: he had underestimated her vigilance and her ability to anticipate. Margaret didn't move hastily, but made a simple gesture. She took her small pistol from her bag and aimed, not at Tyler, but at a series of targets arranged around them. In a few seconds, each target was hit with perfect precision, demonstrating her complete control, even under pressure. Tyler recoiled in shock. He had tried to create an unpredictable situation, but Margaret had neutralized him before he could even react. His arrogant smile vanished, replaced by a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You see, Tyler," Margaret said gently but firmly, "it's not strength or cunning that makes a sniper. It's patience, experience, and self-control. Underestimating someone can be costly." Tyler slowly lowered his rifle, finally understanding that his personal revenge had no chance. Margaret holstered her pistol, picked up her cane, and walked away, leaving Tyler to face his own defeat. This time, he knew it wasn't just a game or a public humiliation. He had been confronted with the true power of an expert, and he would emerge from it changed. After her personal confrontation with Tyler, Margaret thought peace would finally return to the park. But the next day, she spotted a group of 4 young men heading towards her with feverish, determined energy. Tyler was at their head, more arrogant than ever, convinced that a collective attack would be enough to bring her down. "We'll all show him together," Tyler said in a low voice, as if to galvanize his friends. "Yes. This time she won't be able to stop us all," added one of the boys, breathless but confident. Margaret, sitting on her bench, calmly observed the group's approach. She noted every movement, every posture, every weapon. Her experience allowed her to predict their actions even before they executed them. "Are you here to learn one last lesson?" she asked in a soft but authoritative voice. Tyler burst out laughing, but the laughter died in his throat when he saw Margaret's absolute calm. They spread out around her, thinking they could surprise her with a coordinated attack, but Margaret was not intimidated. In one fluid motion, she drew her pistol and adjusted her stance. The youths fired almost simultaneously, but Margaret was already prepared. Her bullets struck the targets and obstacles they had set up to attack her. The shots echoed around them, but none hit her. Every move the boys made was anticipated and neutralized with apparent ease. Tyler then made a desperate attempt to approach, but Margaret subtly deflected him with incredible precision, using strategic shots to create distractions without ever injuring anyone. The others, seeing their leader disconcerted, hesitated and slowly lowered their arms. "I told you so," said Margaret, putting away her pistol. Underestimating someone, regardless of their age or appearance, is a grave mistake. True power isn't measured by speed or brute force, but by skill and experience. The young people, exhausted and ashamed, remained silent. Tyler, humiliated, realized that this collective confrontation was worthless against Margaret's strategy and control. Margaret returned to her bench, as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a group of young people forever marked by the lesson in humility and respect she had just given them. A few days after the final confrontation in the park, Margaret thought peace had returned. But that morning, she received an unexpected message. Tyler had prepared a public challenge, claiming to invite the entire town to a shooting competition to prove his superiority. Margaret frowned, intrigued. She knew this wasn't just a challenge, but an attempt at revenge in front of an audience. Yet, she wasn't one to back down. She decided to respond, not out of arrogance, but to teach a final lesson about humility and respect. On the day of the competition, a small crowd had gathered. Tyler stood proudly in front of the shooting range, while Margaret watched calmly from the other side. The mayor of the town announced the rules. Each participant would shoot at moving targets placed at varying distances. Tyler, confident in his abilities, fired first. The bullets hit some targets, but missed the more difficult ones. He turned to Margaret with a confident smile, convinced that this time he could impress her. "Your turn, Granny," he called out, laughing and making arrogant gestures. Margaret advanced slowly. She didn't rush, she analyzed each target, each movement, each angle. Her bullets began to hit even the most difficult targets with perfect precision, in record time. The spectators were astonished. Each shot seemed orchestrated with almost supernatural mastery. Tyler felt panic rising. He tried increasing the speed, changing targets, but Margaret anticipated every move. Her shots were calculated, strategic, and yet impressively fluid. The crowd erupted in applause, not only for Margaret, but also for the lesson in control and patience she had just demonstrated. "You see," said Margaret with a quiet smile, "true competence is not measured by arrogance or speed. It is measured by patience, experience, and respect." Tyler lowered his eyes, unable to reply. His mockery and schemes had failed against the wisdom and composure of an old woman he had mistaken for weak. The lesson was clear to everyone: underestimating someone is the worst mistake one can make. After the public competition, Tyler and his friends were completely dejected. Shame consumed them. They had gone to so much trouble to impress Margaret, but each time they had failed. The old woman, meanwhile, seemed to be returning to her daily routine, as if nothing had happened. That morning, Tyler finally decided to face reality. He sat alone on a bench, thinking back on everything that had happened. Margaret walked past him, her cane in hand, and stopped. "Tyler," she said gently, "I don't want to humiliate you any further. But I want you to understand something. True strength lies not in the desire to surpass others, but in respect and discipline." Tyler lowered his eyes, unable to reply. The truth of her words struck him deeply. "Margaret. He murmured, I think. I misunderstood. She smiled slightly. That's normal, young man. Many people don't understand until they're faced with reality. You still have time to learn, if you really want to. The other boys approached timidly. Each had witnessed Margaret's incredible composure and how she had handled every situation without unnecessary violence. They began to realize that their arrogance and mockery had blinded them. We're sorry, said one of them, his voice trembling. Yes, we should never have underestimated you, Tyler added. Margaret nodded, satisfied with their honesty. She showed them that learning was always possible, even after serious mistakes. She explained the basics of precision and discipline, not to humiliate them, but to guide them. The lesson was learned: respect is not earned through force or cunning, but through self-control and understanding of others. The young people left, transformed, with a mixture of respect and humility, while Margaret returned to her bench, savoring the newfound tranquility of the park. A few weeks after the confrontations with Tyler and his friends, Margaret thought peace had returned to the park. But one morning, a completely unexpected event disturbed her calm. A national shooting competition was being held in the city, attracting the best marksmen in the country. Margaret received an official invitation, insisting that she participate. She knew she was capable of competing with anyone, but she felt a thrill of excitement. This was no longer just a lesson for the mocking youths, it was a true test of her abilities. On the day of the competition, the park had been transformed into a vast shooting range, complete with moving targets, complex obstacles, and a large crowd to watch the participants. The best marksmen in the region were already there, confident and arrogant. Some snickered as Margaret, an elderly woman, arrived, accompanied only by her walking stick and her compact pistol. "Are you kidding?" murmured a young competitor. "We're not going to get beaten by a granny, are we?" Margaret smiled slightly and settled calmly, analyzing the course and the targets with her piercing gaze. Every movement of the other participants, every angle of fire, every distance, she recorded it like a plan of attack. When the competition began, the fastest and most experienced shooters rushed forward, firing with force and speed. Margaret, however, remained methodical. Her shots were calculated, precise, and perfectly synchronized with the movements of the targets. Where others missed, she consistently hit the bullseye, without ever rushing. The crowd was stunned. The other competitors couldn't believe what they were seeing. An old lady was outperforming the best shooters in the region with almost supernatural skill and composure. At the end of the competition, Margaret had not only won first place, but she had also left a clear message for everyone: true competence does not depend on age, speed, or appearance, but on experience, patience, and discipline. Even Tyler and his friends, who had come to watch from a distance, were impressed and respectful. They understood that underestimating someone could lead to lessons far greater than those they had received in the park. After her resounding victory in the national competition, Margaret Reynolds became a respected figure throughout the town. Local newspapers told the story of an old lady sharpshooter who had surprised everyone with her skill and composure. But for Margaret, it wasn't the fame that mattered, but the lesson she taught to those who had underestimated her. Tyler and his friends, deeply affected by all their defeats, came to see her in the park. This time, they were neither arrogant nor mocking. Their attitude had changed. "Margaret," said Tyler, his voice low, "I think we finally understand," he began. "Yes," continued another, "we were blinded by our arrogance. We just wanted to beat you, but we learned much more than that." Margaret smiled gently. "You see, young people," she said, "true power is never in ego or brute force. It lies in discipline, patience, and respect. When you respect others and yourselves, you truly become invincible." She even invited the young people to train under her supervision, not to humiliate them, but to teach them what she knew: precision, control, and patience. The mockers of yesterday became diligent students, transforming their past mistakes into learning experiences. The park once again became a place of calm and serenity, but now with a symbol of respect and excellence. Margaret continued her daily walks, observing the birds, greeting the locals and, sometimes, giving advice on shooting and discipline. And for those who had once laughed at her, the lesson remained forever etched in their minds: never judge someone by their appearance, for true strength can be found where it is least expected. Margaret, with her keen and piercing gaze, was now more than just an old lady in the park. She was a living legend, a reminder that experience, patience, and respect always triumph over arrogance and haste.